Have you ever wondered how a single word could send a powerful figure spiraling into chaos? In a world where economic figures and political theatrics mix in the most bizarre cocktail, one late-night comedian's quip managed to upend the fragile composure of a former president. Let's explore the extraordinary sequence of events that began with a simple word and spiraled into an all-out media frenzy. It all started with a discussion about economic numbers figures like 9% and 5% unemployment balanced against predictions of a cautiously constructive monetary policy if rates hovered around 28 to 29.9%, but warned of extreme outcomes should rates ever approach 42%. These seemingly dry economic observations set the stage for an even more dramatic incident involving political theatrics. Amid these discussions of interest rates and fiscal policy, John Oliver, the king of biting political commentary, delivered a succinct remark on his show that would resonate far beyond the studio. John Oliver's comment was brief, a single, well-chosen word: sad. With that utterance, he not only threw the proverbial finger at Donald Trump, but also managed to encapsulate the essence of a controversial former president's worldview. This was not a long diatribe or a detailed indictment. It was simply one word, yet. For Trump, a man whose communication style is built on memorable catchphrases and Twitter soundbites, that one word struck a particularly sensitive nerve. At the moment the word was spoken on last week tonight, the tension in the studio was palpable. Audiences watched, rapt, as Oliver delivered his rhetorical grenade with impeccable timing. He described how Trump has repeatedly declared that reality is unimportant to him, a statement that, while not new, was delivered with a precision that left viewers both amused and alarmed. Liberals might have cheered the remark, while others could only ask, why does a single word have such power for Trump? Sad wasn't just an insult. It was a mirror reflecting his own penchant for using that term to describe nearly every unfavorable situation or opponent, in a twist that could only be described as theatrically childish. Trump's reaction was immediate and explosive. Hours later, in a manner that resembled a toddler thrown into a tantrum over a favorite toy being snatched away, he took to Twitter with a fury that was anything but presidential. It was 3 o'clock in the morning when Trump began his tirade, a storm of tweets characterized by exclamation points, capital letters, and an unrelenting barrage of insults. He started by addressing John Oliver directly, labeling him John Loser, and, in a move that reappropriated the very word that had stung him, added more like sad. The audacity and simplicity of his reply left no room for subtlety. What followed was a parade of bizarre statements, each more peculiar than the last. Trump's tweets ranged from commenting on the size of his hands, insisting they were anything but little, to asserting that he was the least depressed president ever. He used the same rhetoric that had long characterized his communication style: exaggeration and distortion of facts. From inflating the size of his inauguration crowd to baseless claims of massive voter fraud, Trump's digital outburst was a free-for-all reminiscent of a poorly controlled storm. The former president even took aim at his personal history, boasting about his ability to stand in the rain while declaring that the inauguration weather was a sunny day, a contradiction to reality that had become all too familiar. Not content with the chaos on Twitter alone, Trump escalated the situation by holding an unplanned press conference. The imagery was surreal: a man who looked more like a human caricature than a leader, standing behind a podium and launching into a 45-minute diatribe about a British comedian. In a press room filled with reporters expecting to hear about pressing issues like the economy or healthcare, Trump's focus remained stubbornly fixed on John Oliver. For nearly the entire duration, he complained about Oliver in an incoherent stream of insults and nonsensical claims. even referring to him in demeaning terms like British gas. Despite Oliver's very public origins in another country. As the press conference wore on, the scene became increasingly absurd. One could almost imagine the teleprompter operator giving up and resorting to playing a casual game on his phone, perhaps Candy Crush, rather than attempting to keep up with Trump's rambling. Amid the barrage of insults, Trump also revisited some of his familiar talking points, his notorious exaggerations about crowd sizes, his unfounded allegations of election fraud, and even his penchant for distorting the weather. Each statement served only to further entrench the surreal quality of the spectacle. The president's attempts at distraction did not stop there. At one point during his disjointed speech, Trump even took a jab at his own physical attributes, insisting his hands were not little, a remark that seemed intended to divert attention from his repeated exaggerations about his achievements. His strategy was clear. By focusing on minutiae and trivialities, he hoped to distract from the broader implications of his failed policies and erratic behavior. It was an approach that only underscored his desperation to cling to power and deflect criticism. Meanwhile, speculation swirled about the reaction of those closest to him. Rumors, of course, purely speculative, and part of the performance suggested that Melania Trump might have been busy searching for how to divorce a president for dummies, or perhaps even redecorating the White House with pillows emblazoned with a nonchalant "I don't really care, do you?" These humorous suggestions, though unverified, added to the overall picture of a former president whose world was unraveling with every passing moment. Yet, perhaps the most fascinating aspect of this entire debacle was how a single word could trigger such a chain reaction. Sad had become a catch-all term for Trump, a word he used liberally on Twitter to dismiss critics, opponents, and even his own alleged missteps. John Oliver's deliberate use of that word was akin to taking away a cherished possession from a child, leaving the child distraught and disoriented. For Trump, whose ego had been carefully cultivated over decades, the public airing of his sad rhetoric was a blow he could not easily recover from. As the press conference reached its bizarre climax, Trump ended with a series of disjointed phrases: CF, bigly, huge, words that at first seemed like random utterances, yet on closer examination appeared to mirror the style of his previous tweets. A perceptive reporter even noted that each absurd statement he made was a replay of his earlier online musings, as if he were performing a greatest hits medley in reverse. This strange convergence of his live speech and digital presence left many wondering if his entire public persona was being driven by a botched predictive text algorithm rather than any coherent political strategy. The fallout was immediate and, for many observers, inevitable. Here was a former leader whose entire world appeared to collapse like a house of cards, caught in a hurricane, all because of one single, devastating word. It demonstrated, in a most dramatic fashion, that sometimes the smallest pebble can trigger the largest avalanche, especially when that pebble is aimed at an ego as fragile as a soap bubble in a storm. The implications of this incident stretch far beyond the momentary spectacle. If Trump's tweets and impassioned outbursts are indeed the product of an unstable, almost automated process, what might we expect next? Could headlines soon read: Trump declares war on Greenland, claims it's to green, or perhaps president bans all stairs, installs gold-plated escalators nationwide? Such scenarios, as absurd as they may seem, underline the precarious nature of a political climate where even a comedian's offhand remark can cause seismic shifts. In the end, what we witnessed was more than just a clash of words or a media frenzy. It was a vivid illustration of how a carefully constructed public image can be shattered by the smallest crack. One statement from a late-night comedian managed to expose the vulnerability of a man once considered one of the most powerful figures in the world. It was a reminder that beneath the layers of bravado and bombast, even the mightiest can be brought low by something as simple as a well-placed word. As we reflect on this surreal episode, it's hard not to feel a mixture of amusement and disbelief. The spectacle of a former president reduced to a series of incoherent tweets and a disastrous press conference resembles something out of a poorly written political satire. And yet, in the realm of American politics, the line between satire and reality has grown increasingly blurred. For now, at least. The Trump circus continues to provide endless material for commentators and comedians alike, promising that the show is far from over. So, the next time you find yourself lamenting the trivialities of your own day, remember, at least you aren't so insecure that a comedian's single word could send you careening into a tailspin of public humiliation. In the grand theater of politics, it seems that sometimes even the most inconsequential pebble can spark an avalanche, and in this case, the avalanche has a name, and that name is sad.